The frigid winds of KZ-9 howled across the jagged landscape as Dr. Mira Tran made her way through the crystalline forest. Each step released clouds of condensation from her environmental suit, the only barrier between her human flesh and the corrosive atmosphere of this untamed world. The year was 2375, and humanity had spread across the stars, forming the Galactic Alliance alongside other sentient species, each categorized, ranked, and assigned their place within the cosmic hierarchy. And at the top of that hierarchy stood the Drakari. Mira adjusted her scanner, the holographic readout flickering as it analyzed the bizarre flora surrounding her. The trees, if one could call them that, were crystalline structures that absorbed and refracted the pale blue light of KZ-9's distant sun. They had evolved to withstand the planet's acid rain and sub-zero temperatures, phenomena that occurred simultaneously in this bizarre ecosystem. As a planetary biologist, such contradictions fascinated her. "Base, this is Tran," she spoke into her comm unit. Moving deeper into Sector 7, these crystalline structures appear to be exhibiting signs of sentience at a rudimentary level. They're responding to vibration patterns in ways that suggest neural networking. "Copy that, Dr. Tran," came the reply from Captain Lowell, her security liaison at the research base. "Remember, your extraction window closes in 4 hours. The acid rain forecast shows a major downpour beginning at 1900 hours. "Understood," she replied, her attention already shifting back to her work. 4 hours was barely enough time to collect preliminary data, but the Council insisted on these strict safety protocols, especially on uncharted worlds. The Council. Mira felt a familiar frustration rising within her chest. The Galactic Alliance Science Council governed all scientific expeditions with bureaucratic precision, their protocols often stifling genuine discovery. But she had fought for 6 months to get permission for this expedition to KZ-9, and she wasn't going to waste a second of it. As she moved deeper into the crystal forest, the ground beneath her began to rumble. Not unusual on KZ-9, where tectonic activity was constant. She'd been briefed on the network of underground caverns and volatile acid geysers that dotted the landscape. Still, something about this tremor felt different, more localized, almost rhythmic. Her scanner beeped urgently, drawing her attention to a massive heat signature approximately 2 kilometers to the east, near what appeared to be a mountain with multiple volcanic vents. Whatever was generating that heat was alive and enormous. Every protocol in her briefing specifically prohibited investigating unidentified megafauna without a security team. But her scientific curiosity burned brighter than her caution. She remembered the words of her mentor. "Sometimes, the greatest discoveries lie just beyond the boundary of protocol." Mira recalibrated her suit's thermal regulators and set off toward the heat signature, each step taking her further from safety and deeper into the unknown. The crystal forest thinned as she approached the mountain, giving way to a barren expanse of blackened, acid-scarred rock. Steam vents hissed around her, spewing clouds of sulfurous vapor that her suit's filters struggled to process. The tremors grew stronger as she approached the base of the mountain. Her scanner now indicated the heat source was inside, some kind of cavern network within the volcanic formation. A narrow fissure in the mountainside looked just wide enough for her to squeeze through. "This is either the stupidest thing I've ever done," she muttered to herself, "or the most important." She switched off her comm unit. No need for Captain Lowell to hear about this particular deviation from protocol. Then, with a deep breath that tasted metallic through her respirator, she slipped into the fissure. The interior of the mountain was a cathedral of geological wonders. Massive stalactites hung from the ceiling, glowing with bioluminescent fungi in shades of blue and purple. The air was hot and thick with mineral-rich steam, but surprisingly less acidic than outside. Mira's suit sensors indicated the atmosphere was almost breathable, a fascinating anomaly she would have to study later. She followed the heat signature deeper into the cavern network, picking her way carefully across the uneven terrain. The tremors had stopped, replaced by an eerie silence broken only by the occasional drip of condensation and the soft hum of her equipment. As she rounded a corner, the cavern opened into a massive chamber, and Mira froze in her tracks. There, sprawled across the chamber floor, lay the unmistakable form of a Drakari warrior. The Drakari, apex predators of the galaxy, conquerors and enforcers of their own brutal brand of order. Their reptilian species had evolved on a world with 3 times Earth's gravity and twice its radiation levels, producing warriors of legendary strength and durability. Their militaristic society had conquered dozens of star systems before agreeing to join the Galactic Alliance. And even then, they remained aloof, dangerous, the undisputed alpha species whom all others approached with caution and deference. And one was here, motionless, in a cavern on an uninhabited world. Mira's training screamed at her to retreat, to report this finding immediately. Alliance protocols regarding Drakari were absolutely clear. No unsanctioned contact, no approach without diplomatic clearance, and certainly no intervention in Drakari affairs without express permission from both Alliance leadership and Drakari command. But something was wrong. The massive creature, easily 3 meters tall even in its prone position, was surrounded by a pool of thick, dark fluid that Mira recognized as blood. The Drakari's scaled armor, typically of vibrant crimson, had faded to a dull maroon. Its powerful tail, capable of shattering titanium, lay limp and partially submerged in a pool of bubbling acid that was slowly, inexorably consuming it. The warrior was dying. Mira hesitated, her mind racing through scenarios, regulations, and potential consequences. Interfering with a Drakari, even to save its life, could be interpreted as an act of aggression or disrespect. Stories circulated throughout the alliance of scientists and diplomats who had inadvertently offended Drakari cultural sensibilities and paid with their lives. But she was a doctor first, an oath she had taken on Earth, millennia old, but still sacred, echoed in her mind. First, do no harm. Standing by while a sentient being died, regardless of species, would violate everything she believed in. Decision made. Mira rushed forward, her medical scanner already assessing the Drakari's condition. The readings were grim: massive trauma to the abdomen, severe acid burns along the lower extremities, and dangerously low vital signs. The warrior's sophisticated armor was damaged, its built-in medical systems offline. The Drakari's eyes remained closed, but the shallow rise and fall of its massive chest confirmed it still lived. Mira's emergency medical kit was designed for humans, not 3-meter reptilian warriors, but the principles of trauma care were universal. She administered a broad-spectrum coagulant to slow the bleeding, then used her portable surgical unit to seal the worst of the wounds. The acid burns were more challenging. Her neutralizing agent was nearly depleted by the time she finished treating the affected areas. As she worked, she couldn't help but marvel at Drakari physiology. Their dual cardiopulmonary system provided redundancy that would have killed any human 3 times over. The density of their muscle tissue and the efficiency of their cellular regeneration were evolutionary marvels. "You are one tough customer," she whispered, as she applied the last of her regenerative mesh to a particularly deep wound. "What were you doing out here alone?" The Drakari gave no response, but its breathing had steadied, and the medical scanner showed improving vital signs. Mira sat back on her heels, exhausted but satisfied. She had done what she could with her limited supplies. Whether the warrior survived now depended on its own legendary resilience and how quickly she could arrange a proper medical evacuation. Which brought her to her next problem: explaining to Captain Lowell and the Science Council why she had violated approximately 17 different protocols in the last hour. Mira reactivated her comm unit, preparing for the inevitable storm. Before she could speak, however, a massive tremor shook the cavern, more violent than any before. Stalactites crashed down around her as she scrambled for cover. "Tran to base, emergency extraction needed at my location," she shouted over the rumbling. "Tran, where the hell have you been?" Lowell's voice crackled with static and obvious anger. "The entire region is becoming unstable. Massive seismic activity." "I know. I'm inside the mountain with an injured Drakari. I need immediate medical evacuation and—" "Oh, what?" Lowell's voice rose to a shout that made her comm unit squeal with feedback. Before Mira could explain, a deafening roar filled the cavern as one of the walls collapsed, revealing a network of tunnels filled with glowing, bubbling acid. The liquid began pouring into the chamber at an alarming rate. "No time to explain," Mira shouted. "The cavern is flooding with acid. Sending coordinates now. Bring a heavy lift medical shuttle." She cut the transmission and turned back to the Drakari. There was no way she could move the massive warrior on her own, and the acid was advancing rapidly across the chamber floor. In minutes, they would both be dissolved into the geological record of KZ-9. Desperation driving her. Mira ripped open the panel on her suit's back, accessing the emergency power core. The suit was designed to sustain life in hostile environments for up to 72 hours. If she rerouted the power to the suit's exoskeletal frame, she might, just might, have enough mechanical advantage to drag the Drakari to higher ground. It was a gamble that would leave her with minimal life support, but the alternative was certain death for them both. With practiced movements born from years of field improvisation, Mira rewired her suit systems. The protective shell that had been flexible and responsive stiffened into a crude exoskeleton, multiplying her strength by a factor of 5. Still barely enough to move a Drakari warrior. But it would have to do. Her respirator sputtered, and the temperature regulation failed immediately, leaving her gasping in the hot, mineral-laden air. She would have minutes, not hours, before hyperthermia or toxin inhalation incapacitated her. Gritting her teeth, Mira grabbed the Drakari under its massive arms and pulled with every ounce of her augmented strength. The warrior slid across the stone floor with agonizing slowness. Each centimeter, a victory against impossible odds. The acid pool expanded relentlessly behind them, hissing and bubbling as it dissolved everything it touched. Sweat poured down Mira's face inside her helmet, her vision blurring as toxic gases began to seep through her compromised filtration system. "Come on," she gasped, straining against the immense weight. "Just a little further." Her muscles screamed in protest as she dragged the Drakari onto a raised stone platform, some kind of natural altar or formation that rose a meter above the cavern floor. It wasn't much, but it might buy them enough time for rescue to arrive. As she collapsed beside the unconscious warrior, her strength finally giving out, Mira thought she saw its eyelids flicker. For an instant, a sliver of amber iris became visible, focusing on her with startling intensity. Then darkness claimed her, and she knew nothing more. Consciousness returned to Mira in fragments. The antiseptic smell of a medical bay, the soft beep of monitoring equipment, the cool sensation of regenerative bandages on her arms and legs. She opened her eyes to the familiar ceiling of the Alliance Research Base's infirmary. Turning her head slightly, she saw Captain Lowell standing at the foot of her bed, his expression an uncomfortable mixture of concern and fury. "You're awake," he said flatly. "Good, because you have a lot of explaining to do." Mira tried to sit up, wincing as pain shot through her body. "The Drakari," she croaked, her throat raw from toxic exposure. "Did we get it out?" "Yes. Though I'm still trying to understand why my lead scientist thought it appropriate to risk her life saving a Drakari warlord." Lowell's tone was cold, professional, but Mira could hear the underlying tension. "Warlord?" She blinked in confusion. "What are you talking about?" Lowell activated a holographic display above her bed. The image showed the Drakari she had rescued, now conscious and standing at its full, intimidating height. Even injured, the warrior exuded lethal power and authority. Its scales gleamed like burnished metal in the artificial light, and its amber eyes seemed to burn with internal fire. "That," Lowell said, pointing to elaborate markings on the Drakari's armor, "is Grand Marshal Vascor, commander of the 7th Drakari Battle Fleet, and one of their most decorated military leaders. When our rescue team realized who we were extracting, half of them nearly quit on the spot." Mira stared at the image in disbelief. She had saved not just any Drakari, but one of their highest-ranking military commanders. The implications were staggering. "Where is he now?" she asked. "Gone." Lowell deactivated the hologram. "A Drakari vessel entered orbit 6 hours after we brought you both back. They retrieved him without so much as a thank you or an explanation for why one of their elite warriors was alone on an unexplored planet." Mira nodded slowly, trying to process everything. "What about the Science Council?" At this, Lowell's expression darkened further. "They're displeased, to put it mildly. You violated first contact protocols, endangered Alliance personnel, and interfered in Drakari affairs without authorization. There's already talk of revoking your research license." The words hit Mira like a physical blow. Her research license, her life's work, her identity. "They can't do that," she whispered. "I was saving a life." "They can, and they might." Lowell's voice softened slightly. "For what it's worth, I've submitted a report emphasizing the humanitarian nature of your actions. But the Council is more concerned with potential diplomatic fallout than your good intentions." Mira closed her eyes, suddenly exhausted despite having just awakened. "How long until they decide?" "A formal hearing is scheduled for 3 days from now. You'll be expected to attend via holographic link." Lowell hesitated, then added, "Dr. Tran, what you did was either incredibly brave or incredibly foolish. Possibly both. But I want you to know that regardless of the Council's decision, your team here stands behind you." She managed a weak smile. "Thank you, Captain." After Lowell left, Mira lay staring at the ceiling, replaying the events in the cavern. Had she made the right choice? Would she make the same decision again, knowing the consequences? Yes, she realized, without hesitation, because some principles transcended politics, transcended species, transcended even self-preservation. The oath she had taken as a doctor wasn't just about human lives. It was about life itself, in all its forms. Whatever came next, she would face it with that conviction. 3 days later, Mira stood before the holographic projection of the Science Council. 7 stern faces, arrayed in a semicircle around her. She had been discharged from the medical bay that morning, still weak, but determined to face her judgment with dignity. "Dr. Mira Tran," began Counselor Zhao, the elderly woman who served as head of the Xenobiological Division. "You stand accused of violating protocols regarding non-interference with Drakari affairs, endangering Alliance personnel through reckless actions, and exceeding your research mandate on planet KZ-9. How do you plead?" Mira stood straight, despite the pain still lingering in her muscles. "I acknowledge that I violated protocols, Counselor, but I reject the characterization of my actions as reckless. I made a conscious choice to save a life, a choice I would make again." Murmurs rippled through the council members. Counselor Esteban, a thin man with cybernetic implants visible at his temples, leaned forward. "Dr. Tran, you must understand the position you've put us in. The Drakari are notoriously protective of their autonomy. Many view any unsolicited assistance as an implication of weakness. There are historical cases where well-intentioned interventions have led to violent reprisals." "With respect, Counselor," Mira replied, "those historical cases involved military interventions or political maneuvering. What I provided was basic medical aid to a sentient being in distress. If we abandon our fundamental ethical principles out of fear, what kind of civilization are we building? Another council member, a blue-skinned Tauran with elaborate facial ridges, spoke next. Noble sentiments, Doctor. But the galaxy operates on power dynamics, not idealism. The Drakari understand strength and respect hierarchy. Your actions, however well-intentioned, disrupted that hierarchy. For the next hour, Mira defended her decisions while the council members picked apart her story, her motivations, and her judgment. They questioned her psychological evaluation, her commitment to alliance protocols, even her basic understanding of interspecies relations. Throughout it all, she remained steadfast. She had done what any doctor would do, what any compassionate being should do, when faced with another's suffering. Finally, Counselor Zhao raised her hand, silencing the ongoing debate. We have heard enough. The Council will deliberate and render judgment within 24 hours. Until then, Dr. Tran, you are confined to the research base. Your access to all communications channels and research facilities is suspended, pending our decision. The holographic projections winked out, leaving Mira alone in the small conference room. She exhaled slowly, her shoulders sagging with fatigue and tension. The hearing had gone about as well as she could have expected, which wasn't saying much. As she turned to leave, the room's communication panel chimed, indicating an incoming transmission. Curious. Hadn't the council just cut off her communications? Mira accepted the call. The holographic display flickered, and then a face appeared that made her breath catch in her throat. Grand Marshal Vascor, the Drakari she had saved, stared at her with those penetrating amber eyes. Dr. Mira Tran, the Drakari rumbled, his voice deep and resonant, even through the holographic medium. I have been monitoring your situation. Mira found her voice with difficulty. Marshal Vascor, I'm glad to see you recovered. The Drakari's facial scales shifted in what might have been the equivalent of a smile. Thanks to your intervention, an intervention that, I understand, may cost you dearly. I did what I thought was right, Mira said simply. Vascor studied her for a long moment, his reptilian features unreadable to human eyes. Yes, you did. Without expectation of reward or recognition. Without fear of my kind. Despite the stories your species tells of us. He paused, then continued. Such actions are rare in this galaxy, Dr. Tran. Rarer still from a species that occupies a lesser position in the cosmic hierarchy. Mira bristled slightly at the implied condescension but held her tongue. This was, after all, one of the most powerful military leaders in the Alliance. The Drakari have a concept, Vascor continued, that I believe has no direct translation in your language. The closest approximation would be life debt. When one Drakari saves another's life at great personal risk, a bond is formed that transcends all other obligations. He reached out a frame, then held up an object that gleamed in the light. A small medallion of some dark, iridescent metal, inscribed with intricate symbols. This is a Thakor, a physical manifestation of that bond. I have registered your name in the Chronicles of Honor, Dr. Tran. According to our most ancient traditions, your life is now under my protection, and I am bound to answer your call, should you ever require aid. Mira stared at the medallion, stunned by the implications. Marshal, I don't know what to say. I didn't save you expecting anything in return, which is precisely why you deserve this honor. Vascor's eyes narrowed slightly. Your council fears repercussions from your actions. They need not. I have already communicated with your Alliance leadership. This matter is between us now. Before Mira could respond, the Drakari continued. The medallion will arrive at your research base within the day. Wear it, or keep it as you see fit. but know that it marks you as one who has earned the respect of the Drakari. Not all of my kind will understand or honor this distinction, but those under my command will recognize it." With that cryptic warning, Vascor inclined his head slightly, a gesture of respect that, coming from a Drakari, was profoundly significant. "Until we meet again, Dr. Mira Tran." The transmission ended, leaving Mira alone with her thoughts and the ghost of the medallion's image hovering in her mind. The next morning, Mira received word that the Science Council had reached a decision. She was summoned once more to the conference room, where the holographic projections of the 7 council members awaited her. To her surprise, they appeared distinctly uncomfortable, shifting in their seats and exchanging glances that spoke volumes about some development she wasn't privy to. "Dr. Tran," Counselor Zhao began, her tone markedly different from the previous day's stern admonishment. "After careful consideration of all factors involved in this unusual situation, the Council has decided to issue a formal reprimand for your violation of protocols, which will be entered into your permanent record." Mira waited for the other shoe to drop. The revocation of her license. Reassignment to some desk job far from the frontiers of exploration. But Zhao continued. "However, in light of certain diplomatic considerations that have recently come to our attention, we have determined that no further punitive action is warranted. Your research license will remain valid, and you are free to continue your work on KZ-9, albeit with enhanced security measures and stricter reporting requirements." Mira could hardly believe what she was hearing. "Thank you, Counselor," she managed to say, trying to keep the shock from her voice. "May I ask what diplomatic considerations influence this decision?" Zhao's expression tightened. "That information is classified at the highest levels, Dr. Tran. Suffice it to say that your actions, while procedurally problematic, have inadvertently opened channels of communication that previously seemed inaccessible." Counselor Esteban cleared his throat. "You should know, Doctor, that a package arrived for you this morning. Its contents were scanned as per security protocols and found to contain a Drakari artifact of significant cultural value. Do you have any explanation for this?" So Vascor had sent the medallion as promised. Mira chose her words carefully. "I believe it's a token of appreciation from Marshal Vascor for the medical assistance I provided." "A token of appreciation from a Drakari Grand Marshal," muttered the Tauran counselor, his facial ridges flushing a deeper blue. "In 3 centuries of diplomatic relations, I've never heard of such a thing." Zhao cut him off with a sharp gesture. "Whatever its significance, this artifact is now your personal property, Dr. Tran. However, the Council strongly advises you to keep it private. Flaunting such a connection could have unpredictable consequences." "I understand," Mira said, though in truth, she was only beginning to grasp the implications of Vascor's gift. "Then this hearing is concluded. You may return to your duties immediately." With a wave of Zhao's hand, the holographic projections vanished. Mira stood alone in the conference room, processing what had just happened. She had saved a life and nearly lost her career, only to be saved in turn by the very being she had rescued. The symmetry was not lost on her. When she returned to her quarters, the package was waiting on her desk, a small box made of some unfamiliar material that seemed to absorb rather than reflect light. Inside, nestled on a bed of crimson fabric, lay the Thakor medallion. In person, it was even more striking than it had appeared in the hologram. The metal, if it was metal at all, seemed alive somehow, its iridescent surface shifting with colors that had no names in human language. The inscribed symbols pulsed faintly, as though breathing in time with her own heartbeat. Mira lifted the medallion carefully, surprised by its warmth against her skin. As she held it, a sense of connection washed over her. Not telepathic or supernatural, but a profound awareness that somewhere across the vast distances of space, Vascor was somehow cognizant of this moment. She slipped the chain over her head, tucking the medallion beneath her uniform where it rested against her sternum. Whatever came next, she had the distinct feeling that her life had been irrevocably changed by her decision in that acid-filled cavern. 3 months passed, and life at the research base settled into a new routine. Mira continued her studies of KZ-9's unique ecosystem, now with an expanded team and resources thanks to her unexpected diplomatic coup. The Science Council, while still formally disapproving of her methods, could not argue with the results. Improved relations with the Drakari, who had begun sharing limited biological data on their own evolutionary history. The Thakor medallion remained her secret, worn always beneath her clothing, a constant reminder of the bond she had formed across species lines. Then came the day that changed everything. Mira was in the laboratory, analyzing crystalline samples from the forest, when alarms blared throughout the base. Red emergency lights pulsed as Captain Lowell's voice came over the intercom. "All personnel, this is not a drill. Multiple Drakari warships have entered orbit and are demanding immediate communication. All non-essential personnel, proceed to emergency shelters. Senior staff to the command center immediately." A cold knot formed in Mira's stomach as she abandoned her work and raced toward the command center. Drakari warships? Had something gone wrong? Had she inadvertently caused some diplomatic incident? When she arrived, the command center was in controlled chaos. Officers moved with urgent purpose between stations, while the main view screen showed the intimidating silhouettes of 3 Drakari battlecruisers hanging in orbit above KZ-9. "Dr. Tran," Lowell acknowledged her with a tense nod. "I was about to call for you specifically. It seems our visitors are asking for you by name." "Me?" Mira felt the medallion warm against her skin, as though responding to the proximity of its makers. "Indeed." Lowell gestured to a communications officer. "Put through the transmission." The view screen shifted, and Grand Marshal Vascor's imposing visage filled the display. Unlike in their previous communication, he now wore full battle regalia, a complex suit of living metal that seemed to pulse with its own energy, adorned with symbols of rank and honor that even Mira, with her limited knowledge of Drakari culture, recognized as signifying the highest echelons of their military hierarchy. "Dr. Mira Tran," Vascor's voice rumbled through the command center, causing several officers to visibly flinch. "I require your presence aboard my vessel immediately." Lowell stepped forward, standing at Mira's side. "Marshal Vascor, this is Captain Lowell of the Alliance Research Base. Dr. Tran is under our jurisdiction and protection. May I ask the purpose of this request?" Vascor's amber eyes shifted to Lowell, and the captain seemed to shrink under that predatory gaze. "This is not a request, human. It is a summoning. The life-bearer will attend me on matters of grave importance to both our peoples." "Life-bearer," Lowell whispered to Mira. She touched the hidden medallion through her uniform. "I think he means me. The Thakor, the gift he sent. It apparently signifies some kind of life debt in their culture." Vascor continued before Lowell could respond. "A shuttle will dock with your station in 30 minutes. Dr. Tran will board alone. She will come to no harm. This I swear by the Chronicles of Honor." With that, the transmission ended, leaving the command center in stunned silence. Lowell turned to Mira, his expression a mixture of concern and resignation. "I don't think we have much choice here. An entire Drakari battle fleet for one scientist. They could reduce this base to atoms if they wanted to." "I'll go," Mira said, surprised by the steadiness of her own voice. "I don't think he means me harm. If anything, I believe he's honoring the bond formed when I saved his life." "Bond or not, I don't like this." Lowell ran a hand through his hair. "I'll contact Alliance Command, but it will take hours for any reinforcements to arrive. You'll be on your own." Mira thought of the medallion against her skin, of the strange connection she had felt with Vascor since that day in the cavern. I "Don't think I will be," she said softly. 30 minutes later, she stood in the docking bay as the Drakari shuttle connected with the research base. The sleek, predatory lines of the craft reflected its makers, all deadly efficiency and intimidating power. The airlock cycled, and two Drakari warriors emerged, their scaled armor gleaming under the bay lights. They stood nearly 3 meters tall, their powerful tails sweeping behind them with controlled precision. The insignia on their chest plates marked them as members of Vascor's personal guard, an elite unit, even among the elite Drakari forces. They regarded Mira with unreadable expressions. Then, the lead warrior spoke, his translator rendering his sibilant language into Alliance standard. "Dr. Mira Tran, life-bearer to Grand Marshal Vascor, you will accompany us." It wasn't a question. Mira nodded, touching the medallion beneath her uniform for reassurance. "I'm ready." As she followed the warriors into the shuttle, Captain Lowell called after her. 24 hours, Doctor. If we don't hear from you by then, I'm calling in every favor I have with the Alliance fleet." Mira appreciated the sentiment, though they both knew the Alliance would never risk war with the Drakari over one scientist. She waved acknowledgement, then stepped through the airlock into the shuttle. The interior was Spartan but oddly beautiful, with sweeping organic lines that reminded her of the crystalline forest of KZ-9. The Drakari warriors directed her to a seat designed for smaller species. Evidently, they had prepared for her arrival and secured her with harnesses that adjusted automatically to her human physiology. The journey to the Drakari flagship took less than 15 minutes. But to Mira, it felt like crossing a boundary much greater than mere physical space. She was about to become one of the few humans ever to set foot on a Drakari vessel voluntarily, to be received not as a prisoner or reluctant diplomat, but as something unprecedented, a life-bearer. When the shuttle docked, the warriors escorted her through corridors that seemed to breathe, the walls pulsing subtly with what she recognized as the same living metal that comprised Drakari armor. The air was warmer and heavier than humans preferred, laden with unfamiliar scents that her xenobiologist's mind immediately began categorizing and analyzing. They arrived at a massive chamber that could only be the bridge of the vessel. A semicircular view screen wrapped around nearly half the room, showing the curvature of KZ-9 below and the distant research base, now a tiny speck against the planet's surface. And there, at the center of it all, stood Vascor. In person, the Grand Marshal was even more imposing than in holographic form. He towered over Mira, his scaled body rippling with barely contained power. The living metal of his armor shifted and flowed across his form, adapting continuously to his movements and, she suspected, his moods. When he turned to face her, Mira instinctively reached for the medallion, pulling it from beneath her uniform so that it lay visible against her chest. Vascor's amber eyes fixed on the Thakor, and a sound emerged from him that her translator didn't or couldn't interpret. The other Drakari on the bridge reacted visibly, their postures shifting in what Mira read as surprise or perhaps awe. "Life-bearer," Vascor said, his voice vibrating in her chest. "You wear the Thakor openly. Few non-Drakari would dare." Mira met his gaze steadily. "I wear it with respect for what it represents, Marshal, and with gratitude for the honor you've shown me." The corners of Vascor's mouth lifted slightly, a gesture she recognized from her studies as the Drakari equivalent of approval. "Your kind often fear what they do not understand. But you, Dr. Tran, you act with conviction regardless of fear. It is a quality my people respect." He gestured toward a holographic display at the center of the bridge. "Come. There are matters we must discuss, matters that concern both our peoples." As Mira approached the display, it flickered to life, showing a three-dimensional representation of a star system she didn't immediately recognize. A massive asteroid field encircled the system's outer reaches, with one particular asteroid highlighted in pulsing red. This is the new Arden system, Vascor explained. An alliance colony world with approximately 3 million inhabitants, primarily human, with smaller populations of Toran and Vestan settlers. Mira nodded, familiar with the colony from reports but having never visited personally. What about it concerns the Drakari? Vascor manipulated the display, zooming in on the highlighted asteroid. This object, designated Omega-7 by your scientists, has experienced a significant orbital perturbation due to gravitational interactions within the asteroid belt. According to our calculations, it will impact New Arden in approximately 17 standard days. Mira's blood ran cold as she studied the projection. The asteroid was enormous, at least 20 kilometers in diameter. An impact of that magnitude would be an extinction-level event for the colony. "Surely the Alliance knows about this," she said. "They must be preparing evacuation or intervention measures." "They are aware," Vascor confirmed, his tone darkening. "But there are complications, political entanglements that have paralyzed your leadership." With another gesture, he expanded the display to show a section of the asteroid in detail. Mira gasped as she recognized the distinctive architecture of mining installations. Human mining installations. "The Hazari Dominion," she whispered. The Hazari Dominion, a powerful consortium of corporate interests that operated throughout Alliance space, exploiting resources with often ruthless efficiency. They were technically bound by Alliance law, but their wealth and influence often allowed them to operate in gray areas of legality. Vascor nodded. The asteroid contains significant deposits of neutronium, a rare element essential for advanced propulsion systems. The Hazari have invested billions in those mining operations and are leveraging their political connections to block intervention, claiming the risk is overstated and that their own countermeasures will be sufficient. "But they won't be," Mira said, studying the projections. It wasn't a question. "No. Their proposed solution, targeted explosions to alter the asteroid's course, will at best fragment it into multiple impactors, potentially causing even more widespread destruction. At worst, it will fail entirely." Mira looked up at Vascor, confusion written across her features. "Why are you telling me this? And why bring me here? I'm a biologist, not a politician or an engineer." Vascor's amber eyes seemed to burn with intensity. "Because, Dr. Tran, the Alliance will not act without consensus, and the Hazari have effectively blocked that consensus through their influence. The Drakari Empire, however, has the military capability to neutralize this threat, but any unsolicited intervention on our part would be viewed as an act of aggression by many within the Alliance, potentially triggering a conflict neither of our people's desires." Understanding dawned on Mira. "You need a justification, a request from within the Alliance that doesn't come from official channels." "Precisely." Vascor gestured to the Thakor medallion she wore. "As my life-bearer, you have the right to call upon me for aid, if you were to formally request Drakari intervention to save New Arden. I could act legitimately under our most sacred laws without violating Alliance sovereignty." Mira's mind raced, processing the implications. "But why me? Surely there are diplomats or military officials with more influence who could make this request." "None who bear the Thakor," Vascor replied simply, "and none who would be believed to act out of pure conviction rather than political calculation. Your reputation, Dr. Tran, is known to us. You saved my life without thought of consequence or reward. Such actions speak to character that transcends species differences." He paused, then added, "There is another reason. The leaders of New Arden are already evacuating their wealthiest citizens, while telling the general population that the danger is minimal. Millions will die if nothing is done, and those deaths will be disproportionately among the most vulnerable. I believe this would trouble you." It would, Mira realized, deeply. The thought of millions dying while the privileged few escaped, all to protect corporate profits, was abhorrent. But she was also aware that she was being manipulated, however noble the cause might be. Why do the Drakari care about human colonists? Your species has not historically involved itself in humanitarian causes. Vascor's expression shifted into something she couldn't quite interpret. The Drakari respect strength, Dr. Tran. But strength takes many forms. The willingness to sacrifice oneself for others, as you demonstrated in that cavern, is a form of strength our culture has traditionally undervalued. Perhaps that is changing. He turned back to the display. There is also a practical consideration. The asteroid contains technological artifacts that suggest it was once inhabited by the precursors, the ancient species whose remnants litter this galaxy. If it impacts New Arden, those artifacts will be destroyed, along with any knowledge they might contain. Mira studied the Grand Marshal, trying to read beyond his alien features. Was he telling the truth? Or was this some complex Drakari political maneuver she couldn't hope to understand? In the end, did it matter? If the asteroid really was on a collision course with New Arden, and if the Alliance was paralyzed by Hazari influence, then millions of lives hung in the balance. What exactly would you need me to do? She asked. Accompany me to New Arden, Vascor replied. Witness the situation firsthand. Then, if you judge the threat genuine and our intervention necessary, make a formal request before representatives of both our peoples. The rest will be handled by Drakari forces already positioned near the system. Mira took a deep breath, weighing her options. If she refused, and the asteroid struck New Arden, could she live with herself? If she agreed, and this turned out to be some Drakari power play, would she be complicit in an interstellar incident? But as she looked at the projection of New Arden, a vibrant world teeming with life, all under threat of extinction, she knew there was really only one choice she could make. I'll do it, she said, her voice firm. But I need to see the evidence for myself, and I want unrestricted access to all data regarding the asteroid and its trajectory. Vascor inclined his head in that gesture of respect she had seen before. You shall have it, Life-bearer. We depart immediately for New Arden. The journey will take approximately 30 hours at maximum speed. As Mira was escorted to quarters prepared for her, she touched the Thakor medallion, wondering if she had just made the biggest mistake of her life or taken the first step towards saving millions. Perhaps both. The journey to New Arden was a surreal experience for Mira. She had traveled on Alliance vessels before, but the Drakari flagship, named, she learned, the Sundered Claw, operated according to principles that seemed to blur the line between technology and biology. The living metal that formed the ship's interior responded to its crew, reconfiguring spaces as needed and maintaining optimal environmental conditions without apparent mechanical systems. Food was provided in her quarters, synthesized to match human nutritional requirements, but bearing little resemblance to anything she would recognize as cuisine. Most of her time was spent reviewing the data Vascor had promised. True to his word, she was given unrestricted access to Drakari astronomical observations, trajectory calculations, and even communications intercepted between Hazari Dominion executives discussing the asteroid situation. The evidence was damning. Not only was the asteroid indeed on a collision course with New Arden, but Hazari leadership was fully aware that their proposed countermeasures were inadequate. They were gambling that they could extract the most valuable neutronium deposits before being forced to abandon their operations, all while deliberately downplaying the threat to prevent mass panic that might trigger Alliance military intervention that would likely destroy their mining infrastructure in the process of saving the colony. Most disturbing were the evacuation manifests she discovered, showing how Hazari executives and their families, along with the wealthiest colonists who could afford exorbitant insurance policies, were being quietly removed from New Arden, while the general population remained unaware of the true danger. By the time the Sundered Claw arrived in the New Arden system, Mira's initial skepticism had transformed into cold fury. The Drakari vessel maintained a respectful distance from the colony world, positioning itself near the outer edge of the system, where Alliance patrol ships monitored their presence with obvious tension, but did not interfere. Vascor had officially declared their mission as diplomatic, invoking ancient treaties that allowed for peaceful Drakari movement through Alliance space. "We have received a transmission from the new Arden Governing Council," Vascor informed Mira as they stood on the bridge, observing the beautiful blue-green world that rotated serenely below, oblivious to the threat racing toward it from the outer system. "They are concerned by our presence but have agreed to a meeting. Representatives from the Alliance Security Council and the Hizari Dominion will also attend." Mira nodded, mentally preparing herself for what would undoubtedly be a contentious confrontation. "Will they allow me to present the evidence we've gathered?" "They can hardly prevent it," Vascor replied, with a sound that her translator interpreted as a dry chuckle. The presence of a Drakari battle fleet tends to encourage certain courtesies. Hours later, Mira found herself in the colonial capital's Grand Assembly Hall, a hemisphere of transparent aluminium that offered panoramic views of New Arden's twin moons. The chamber had been designed for the colony's full governing body of 200 representatives. But today, it held less than 30 individuals, a hastily assembled emergency committee. Governor Elias Thorne, a stern-faced man with silver implants visible at his temples, led the new Arden contingent. Beside him sat representatives from the Alliance Security Council, distinguishable by their formal blue uniforms adorned with the spiral galaxy insignia. And opposite them, separated by the symbolism of an empty table section, sat the Hezari delegation. Their leader, Executive Director Kara Voss, exuded the confident arrogance that came from wielding economic power that rivaled many planetary governments. Her silver-threaded business attire probably cost more than Mira earned in a year. When Vascor entered, flanked by two of his warriors, and with Mira at his side, the atmosphere in the chamber shifted palpably. The Drakari Grand Marshal towered over everyone present, his living metal armor rippling with subtle patterns that somehow conveyed both threat and dignity. Governor Thorne rose, visibly steeling himself. "Grand Marshal Vascor, while we respect the Drakari Empire's right to diplomatic missions within Alliance space, the presence of a battle fleet in our system requires explanation." Vascor's amber gaze swept the assembly before settling on Thorne. "I come at the behest of Dr. Mira Tran, a life-bearer bonded to me through the sacred rite of Thakor. She has concerns regarding the safety of your world. Concerns I am honor-bound to address." Murmurs swept through the assembly. The Alliance representatives exchanged glances that mixed confusion with alarm. Clearly, none of them had been briefed on Mira's unique relationship with the Drakari leader. Executive Director Voss was less restrained. "This is preposterous," she declared, rising to her feet. "Some obscure Drakari custom gives this scientist the authority to summon a battle fleet? The Hizari Dominion protests this blatant violation of sovereign commercial rights in the strongest possible terms." Mira stepped forward, the Thakor medallion gleaming against her chest. "My authority comes from the evidence, Director Voss. Evidence that the asteroid Omega-7 will strike New Arden in 15 days, and that your proposed countermeasures are woefully inadequate." She activated a holographic projector she had brought from the Sundered Claw, displaying the asteroid's trajectory in vivid detail above the center of the assembly hall. These calculations, verified by both Drakari astronomers and my own independent analysis, show that the fragmentation strategy proposed by Hizari engineers will result in multiple impact events across the planet's surface. The combined ecological and atmospheric damage would render New Arden uninhabitable for at least a century. Voss's face flushed with anger. "Our scientists are being pressured to support conclusions that protect Hizari investments rather than lives." Mira interrupted, her voice steady but intense. She switched the holographic display to show internal Hazari communications. Communications that should have been secure, but had somehow been obtained by Drakari intelligence. Projected casualty rates acceptable given extraction timetable. She read from one message. Maintain public narrative of minimal risk to prevent interference with operations. Your own words. Director Voss, sent 3 days ago to your board of directors. The chamber erupted in shocked outcries. Governor Thorne's face had gone pale, while the Alliance representatives leaned together in urgent, whispered consultation. Voss remained defiant. Illegally obtained communications prove nothing, and the Hazari Dominion has legal rights to Omega-7 under Alliance mining statutes. Any interference with our operations would constitute theft of corporate assets valued at over 7 trillion credits. And what is the value of 3 million lives? Mira countered, her voice rising with emotion. What is the price tag on an entire world? Before Voss could respond, an aide rushed into the chamber and whispered urgently to Governor Thorne. The governor's expression shifted from concern to alarm. We've just received confirmation from our own astronomical observatory, he announced, his voice strained. An independent analysis confirms Dr. Tran's projections. Omega-7 will impact New Arden in 15 days, 6 hours, and... He swallowed hard. Our scientists concur that the Hazari fragmentation plan would likely worsen the outcome. All eyes turned to Voss, who maintained her composure with practiced political skill. The Hazari Dominion has contingency plans for all scenarios. We are prepared to increase evacuation capacity to accommodate essential personnel and... Essential personnel? Mira interrupted, her disgust evident. You mean the wealthy and politically connected, while millions are left to die. We've seen your evacuation manifests. Director, an Alliance representative, a severe-looking woman with commander's insignia, spoke for the first time. If these projections are accurate, we need to begin full planetary evacuation immediately. But even with every available Alliance vessel, we could only relocate perhaps 20% of the population in the time remaining. Which is why I have proposed an alternative, Vascor rumbled, drawing all attention back to his imposing presence. The Drakari Empire possesses technology capable of altering the asteroid's trajectory without fragmentation. We can divert Omega-7 safely away from New Arden without destroying it, or its valuable contents. Executive Director Voss leapt to her feet again. Absolutely not! Omega-7 is Hazari property under Alliance law. Any interference would save 3 million lives, Mira cut in. Lives that should matter more than corporate profits. Governor Thorne looked between the Hazari executive and the Drakari marshal, clearly caught in an impossible political position. The Alliance Security Council would need to authorize any Drakari military operations within our territory, he said carefully. The commander from the Security Council nodded. Under normal circumstances, yes. But there are emergency provisions for existential threats to Alliance worlds. If New Arden's Governing Council formally requests assistance, which would constitute illegal seizure of Hazari assets, Voss protested. Our legal team is prepared to file injunctions that would freeze all Alliance funding to New Arden for a minimum of... Enough. Vascor's voice cut through the chamber like a blade, silencing all other voices. This debate wastes precious time. Dr. Tran, as my life-bearer, you have witnessed the threat and the failure of the Alliance to address it. Will you formally invoke the right of Thakor and request Drakari intervention? All eyes turned to Mira. In that moment, she felt the weight of millions of lives balancing against interstellar politics and corporate greed. The Thakor medallion seemed to burn against her chest, a physical manifestation of the responsibility she now bore. She took a deep breath and spoke the words that Vascor had taught her during their journey to New Arden. By the sacred bond of Thakor, by the life debt that binds us, I, Mira Tran, Call upon Grand Marshal Vascor and the forces under his command to protect the people of New Arden from destruction. This I request not for myself, but for those who cannot speak for themselves, for those whose lives hang in the balance." The formal phrases echoed in the silent chamber. Vascor inclined his head, a gesture of profound respect and acceptance that even the non-Drakari in the room could recognize. "By the chronicles of honor, by the ancient laws of my people, I accept this calling," he responded, his voice resonating with ceremonial gravity. "The Drakari Empire will act to preserve New Arden and its people." Before anyone could respond, the Assembly Hall's communication system chimed with an emergency alert. The main display activated automatically, showing a live feed from orbit. Additional Drakari vessels had arrived in the system. Not warships, but massive engineering craft, unlike anything Mira had seen before. They were already moving toward the outer system, toward Omega-7. "As we have been speaking," Vascor explained, "my fleet has been positioning itself to implement our solution. The asteroid will be enveloped in a gravitational manipulation field that will gently alter its trajectory. No fragmentation, no destruction of the valuable resources it contains. Merely a change in course that will take it safely past New Arden." Executive Director Voss was livid. "This is piracy, theft on an interstellar scale. The Hazari Dominion will—" "Will what?" Mira challenged her. "Admit that you were willing to sacrifice millions of lives for profit? That you deliberately misled an entire planet about a threat you knew was real? I'm sure the Alliance courts would be fascinated by the evidence we've gathered." Voss fell silent, her expression calculating. Mira could almost see the executive running cost-benefit analyses behind her eyes, weighing legal battles against public relations disasters. Governor Thorne cleared his throat. "Given the emergency nature of this situation, and the clear and present danger to New Arden, I am invoking my executive authority to formally request and authorize the Drakari intervention. The Alliance Security Council can ratify this decision after the immediate threat has been addressed." The commander from the Security Council nodded her agreement. "Noted and logged. We will dispatch additional Alliance vessels to monitor the operation and begin contingency evacuation planning in case the Drakari solution proves insufficient." With the political formalities addressed, all attention turned to the main display, where the Drakari engineering vessels had reached Omega-7. Massive arrays of equipment deployed around the asteroid, generating fields of energy that the sensors struggled to define. "The process will take approximately 72 hours, Vascor explained. "The trajectory must be altered gradually to prevent structural damage to the asteroid itself." For 3 days, New Arden existed in a state of suspended animation. The truth about Omega-7 had spread throughout the colony, causing initial panic that gradually transformed into a strange, unified calm as the people watched the Drakari vessels working to save them from afar. Mira spent those days moving between the planet's surface and the Sundered Claw, serving as an unofficial liaison between the Drakari and the increasingly curious human population. Where once the reptilian warriors had been viewed with fear and suspicion, they were now cautiously regarded as saviors, a transformation that clearly made some in the Alliance hierarchy uncomfortable. On the 3rd day, as the operation neared completion, Mira stood with Vascor on the bridge of the Sundered Claw, watching as the final adjustments to Omega-7's trajectory were implemented. "It is done," Vascor announced, as the asteroid's new path was confirmed on the ship's sensors. "New Arden is safe. Omega-7 will pass no closer than 5 million kilometers from the planet, close enough for continued study and eventual mining, but posing no threat." Mira felt a wave of relief wash over her. "Thank you, Marshal. I don't know how to properly express my gratitude." Vascor turned to her, his amber eyes studying her with that intensity she had come to recognize as his natural state, rather than any particular emotion. "It is I who remain in your debt, Dr. Tran." The life debt of Thakor is not so easily discharged, even by saving a world. She smiled. Then perhaps we should consider ourselves mutually indebted, bound by something greater than either of our traditions can fully express. The Grand Marshal made a sound that her translator couldn't interpret, but which she sensed was one of agreement. There is wisdom in that perspective. Our peoples have much to learn from each other. I think. A comfortable silence fell between them as they continued to watch the asteroid's new trajectory displayed on the bridge's main screen. After a moment, Vascor spoke again, his tone more contemplative. The Drakari have long believed that strength is the only virtue worth cultivating, that those who cannot defend themselves deserve the fate that befalls them. He gestured to the image of New Arden, rotating serenely below. Yet, here is a world saved not through its own strength, but through connections formed by compassion. Your compassion, when you found me dying in that cavern. Mira considered his words. Perhaps true strength lies not just in the individual's capacity for power, but in the ability to form bonds that transcend self-interest, to recognize that survival itself is a collective endeavor, especially among the stars. Vascor's scales shifted in that expression she now recognized as thoughtful consideration. A perspective worth contemplating. The galaxy is changing, Dr. Tran. The old hierarchies are proving insufficient for the challenges we face. Perhaps it is time for the Drakari to change as well. When they returned to New Arden's surface for the formal ceremony, recognizing the Drakari's role in saving the colony, Mira was surprised by the transformation in the political landscape. Executive Director Voss and the Hazari delegation had departed the system entirely, apparently deciding that a strategic retreat was preferable to facing public scrutiny of their actions. Governor Thorne, who had nearly collapsed from exhaustion after 3 days of crisis management, welcomed Vascor and Mira with genuine gratitude. Representatives from the Alliance Security Council, initially wary of the Drakari presence, now spoke of historic cooperation and new chapters in interspecies relations. As Mira watched Vascor accept the colony's highest civilian honor, the first time it had ever been bestowed on a non-human, she felt a sense of wonder at how dramatically circumstances could change. 3 months ago, she had been facing the end of her career for daring to save a Drakari life. Now she stood as a bridge between their peoples, honored by both. After the ceremony, as preparations were made for the Drakari fleet's departure, Vascor approached Mira privately. The Sundered Claw will return to Drakari space tomorrow, he informed her. I would extend an invitation for you to accompany us, if you wish. There is much about my people that remains unknown to yours, much that could be learned by someone with your unique perspective. Mira blinked in surprise. You're offering me passage to Drakari territory? I don't think any human has ever... None has ever borne the Thakor, Vascor reminded her. You would travel under my personal protection, with status recognized by our highest councils. Your insights as a xenobiologist would be valued, and your presence would continue the process of change that has begun here. She touched the medallion that had become so familiar against her skin. What would the Alliance say about one of their scientists accepting such an offer? Vascor made a dismissive gesture. The formalities have been addressed. Your Science Council, eager to claim credit for this diplomatic breakthrough, has already approved a cultural exchange initiative. Politics, he added, with what might have been a smile, can be remarkably flexible when success is at stake. Mira laughed, recognizing the truth in his observation. The same council that had been prepared to revoke her license was now apparently positioning her unprecedented relationship with the Drakari as a planned diplomatic strategy. She thought of KZ-9, of the crystal forest and acid caverns where this journey had begun. She thought of the research base where she had spent years studying alien worlds from a cautious distance. And she thought of the stars beyond Drakari space, the unknown civilizations and biological wonders that no human had yet documented. "Yes," she said finally. "Decision made. I would be honored to accept your invitation, Marshal Vascor." The Drakari's amber eyes seemed to glow with satisfaction. "Then it is settled. Tomorrow, we begin a new journey, one that neither of us could have anticipated when fate first brought us together in that cavern." As Mira prepared to depart New Arden the following day, Captain Lowell contacted her via secure channel from the research base on KZ-9. "So the rumors are true," he said when she confirmed her plans. "You're really going to Drakari space, the first human they've ever invited voluntarily." "Apparently so," Mira replied, still somewhat amazed by the turn her life had taken. "The Science Council is calling it a breakthrough in interspecies relations." Lowell snorted. "The same council that was ready to end your career 3 months ago. Bureaucrats, adaptable as cockroaches when it serves them." "They're not wrong, though," Mira pointed out. "This is an unprecedented opportunity. Who knows what we might learn from closer cooperation with the Drakari?" "Just be careful," Lowell cautioned, his expression growing serious. "Not all Drakari share Vascor's apparent enlightenment. You'll be walking among apex predators. Dr. Tran, don't forget that." Mira touched the Thakor medallion. "I won't. But I also won't forget that those predators just saved 3 million lives because of a bond formed when one human chose compassion over fear." After saying her goodbyes to colleagues on New Arden, Mira boarded the shuttle that would take her to the Sundered Claw. As the craft lifted off, she watched the blue-green world recede beneath her, a world that would continue to thrive because of actions she had set in motion. Whatever awaited her in Drakari space, whatever challenges and discoveries lay ahead, she knew she had made the right choice, both in that acid-filled cavern and in the assembly hall of New Arden. Some boundaries were meant to be crossed, some risks worth taking. As the shuttle docked with the Drakari flagship, Mira stood and straightened her uniform, the Thakor medallion gleaming against her chest, a symbol of the bridge she had become between two worlds, two species, two futures now inextricably linked. Grand Marshal Vascor was waiting for her at the airlock, his imposing figure silhouetted against the organic architecture of his vessel. Behind him stood rows of Drakari warriors, their armor gleaming, their posture conveying a respect she would have thought impossible months before. "Welcome aboard, life-bearer," Vascor greeted her, inclining his head in that gesture of respect that had once seemed so incongruous coming from a Drakari. "Are you prepared for what lies ahead?" Mira thought of the chain of events that had brought her here. A moment of compassion in a cavern, a bond formed across species lines, a world saved because of that bond. She thought of the unknown territories awaiting her, both geographical and diplomatic. And she thought of the millions of lives on New Arden, continuing because she had chosen to act when action was needed. "Yes," she replied with quiet confidence, stepping forward to join him. "I'm ready." The airlock closed behind her, sealing her commitment to this new path. Ahead lay Drakari space, uncharted by human scientists, filled with possibilities and potential. Somewhere in that vast territory were answers to questions humans had never thought to ask, challenges they had never imagined facing, and opportunities for growth that could reshape the future of both their peoples. As the Sundered Claw broke orbit and accelerated toward the jump point that would take them beyond Alliance space, Mira stood on the bridge beside Vascor, watching the stars streak past on the main view screen. Each point of light represented worlds to be discovered, life to be understood, boundaries to be crossed. She had begun this journey as a scientist seeking to understand alien biology. She continued it now as something more, a bridge between species, a symbol of what might be possible when compassion transcended fear and cooperation replaced hierarchy. Whatever the future held, Mira Tran was ready to face it. Not alone, but connected by bonds stronger than political alliances, more enduring than ancient prejudices, and more powerful than the divisions of species or space. The journey had only just begun.